I spent 15 years being called a prodigy kid, being called a gifted artist. But the second that I realized that I wasn't the most talented drawer in the room anymore, I decided to become an expert in something else. I became an expert in drugs. I thought I was building a new, cool identity, but what I actually built was the cage that kept me prisoner and took everything away from me. This is how I became a drug addict. I was always very creative, ever since I was a little kid. I still remember, I was 5 years old, 4 years old, and I was already drawing. I had one of those little magnetic little boards. You guys remember those? Those that you could just go with a little thingy and erase everything. Yeah, I had one of those. That was one of my favorite playthings when I was a kid. But holy fuck! Of course, just the second I decide to record a video, someone has to go. Thank you, Jesus Christ. Anyway, for a lot of my life, people were always complimenting me. I guess, for 5-year-old standards, I was a pretty good drawer. I did, just simple rudimentary shit. I just liked drawing. I just really liked drawing, and it was my way of releasing my emotions and just, put myself out there in a way. Creativity is the one thing that is just, I can call it really mine, It's one of the things that makes me myself. And when you make something like that your whole personality and the whole reason for being yourself, when that gets challenged, when you realize you're not that good at that thing that makes you yourself, that kind of has you fucking go crazy. The thing that happened to me was I grew up for most of elementary school and middle school just drawing whatever I wanted, and people were always admiring me. Like, wow, that's such cool drawing, and you're so good at this. And I was always, oh, thank you. Nothing too crazy, but I enjoyed this. I enjoyed being recognized for being good at something. It meant a lot for me because, as I said in a previous video, I kind of have this overarching feeling of not being enough. And once I found that thing that was mine, I just kept doing it. It was my life. I still draw every now and then, I'm still pretty decent at it. During the years I kind of, got better at it, but I didn't get as good as I thought it would, because once I reached 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, then I got a pretty harsh reality check, because I went into an art-focused high school, and everyone is an artist there. You're not the only one anymore. Like every third person is probably as good, if not better, at what you do than you are. And that fucked me up, because up until that point, I was always the best artist, according to other people. I knew I was pretty good and I had potential, but, I just, I liked to impress people. It was nice. But then, I got into high school, and everyone could fucking draw. And a lot of people could draw way better than I did. So, I was like, oh shit, my thing is not my thing anymore. My thing is gone. So now, the constant stream of validation and compliments and everything else that I kept getting again and again and again and again as a child, all of a sudden, that was all gone, right? And that, for someone that grew up on validation, that fucks you up, because you instantly are like, oh shit, how am I gonna get my validation now? I feel like shit. I feel like nothing now. I don't have my thing anymore. Everyone is better than me. So now I had a vacuum that needed to be filled, and drawing just wouldn't cut it anymore. I needed to do something else. So, that's when I tried to venture into different hobbies, like making video games, anything else. I have a lot of different hobbies that I ventured in and tried my hand at. And I tried a lot of things because, I was like, I need to find my thing again that people can recognize me for. Because drawing, not everybody fucking draws at this school. I'm not special anymore. I just needed to feel special. That vacuum eventually got filled, but not by something that most kids would use to fill a vacuum like that. As I mentioned in a previous video, I mentioned this kid that, from now on I will be referring to as G. G, is a kid that, I made friends with in the later years of high school, and he introduced me to drugs, yada yada yada. We just smoked weed together all the time, and that became a new thing. Being so dependent, I just needed belonging and validation so bad that, mind you, we were one of the only 5 or 6, I think 5 boys in the entire class. My class was 26 people. In my country, it's not like in the US that like each class has different people. Like math class might have a different set of people, and then there's a different set for another class. No, it's the same class, same people for every single class. So you're stuck with the same motherfuckers for 2-3 years at a time. So there was, no way around it. I just had to make friends with, the guys. 2 of the guys I wasn't much of a fan of, so I made friends with these other guys. And these other guys smoked weed. So I started smoking weed, and soon enough I started liking it. I liked how it made me feel, and I liked how it made me, in my head, funnier. I always liked making people laugh, and I felt I had this impression when I was high that I was funnier and was making people laugh more, when probably it was just me laughing at my own jokes and being like, oh, I'm cracking myself up. But yeah, G eventually became a person that I started to look up to, because yeah, sure, I made friends with these people, and I really thought that these were my friends because we hung out all the time, and they found me funny, they asked me to do stuff together. To me, that was friendship. To others it's just, maybe a fellowship or whatever. I don't know, is it the same thing? I don't know. My English is not perfect. I have yes or no days. Today I feel pretty good with my vocab, so I'll be using quite peculiar verbiage. Oh shit, sorry guys, I'm yapping about nothing. Anyway, this guy eventually became kind of my mentor figure when it comes to drugs, because when I looked at him in my 17-year-old eyes, I saw him getting so much attention from so many people that were all like everybody seemed to know this guy. He seemed popular. He looked like a popular guy in my eyes, and I was friends with him, right? That I was like, damn, this guy's cool because he smokes weed and shit, and he has a cool personality. And I kind of fell for that trap, because then I was like, I need to become like him. I started eventually mirroring him too. That's what I do. I just mirror people. I'm autistic, so that's what it is, I guess. In my mind, if I, was like him, and, he did a lot of drugs that my 17-year-old mind couldn't even comprehend. I was like, damn, you're my age and you did all of this shit? Like, he had a whole plethora of substances under his belt, while I had none. I had just weed, basically, and fucking coffee, maybe. I didn't even like coffee. Like, I didn't do anything. I just started smoking weed because of him. And then I was like, I need to become like him. He's a mentor to me. I need to become a mentor to other people. I've tried so many hobbies that I've tried to be good at. Pokemon ROM hacking, fucking whatever, making paper little creations and shit. I tried everything, and I'm a jack of all trades and master of none. So I didn't feel like I was actually good at anything, even though I had many things that I could do. So I was like, how do you get good at being a stoner or fucking, a druggie? Nothing. You just have to take drugs. That's easy, isn't it? to become someone who's a veteran or someone who's seasoned and, has had a lot of experience, someone that other people can be like, oh shit, if I want to know my drugs, I better hit this guy up, better ask the old sage of the mountain. I wanted to be that sage of the mountain. So during the next few years, I tried, my mission was just to try as many drugs as I could. After high school finished, I wasn't really friends with G or any of the other guys anymore. So it was just me again. Yep. So what did I do? I just spent kind of a couple years laying low. I was maybe 18, 19, but still that mentality of I need to try drugs, I need to be that, that didn't leave my mind. Sure, I didn't really use weed a lot, following the end of high school because I didn't have any, I didn't really buy weed for myself or, I wasn't really a stoner. I just wanted to hang out with the stoner kids because it was cool. So I just smoked whenever they were smoking. It was rare that I would buy my own weed. And then, after high school I would smoke weed every now and then occasionally. I wasn't a heavy stoner or anything. I never got addicted to anything, but I had some chances to try other drugs during the next few years after high school, and I tried as many drugs as I could. I was only pressured into smoking weed and trying cocaine. The cocaine story is something for another time, I guess, but yeah, I felt, the peer pressure, and I snorted some coke and I didn't like it, and I never did it again. So yeah, tried coke once, I guess. But yeah, my mission was like, and afterwards I was like, cool, I tried a hard drug, and I'm a cool guy, one more thing, gotta catch 'em all. It doesn't work like that. You can't just fucking do that. And I was on a mission to self-destruction basically eventually, but I couldn't see it because I saw myself as a cautious, responsible drug user. I was like I thought I was wise. By the time I was 22, I already tried so many drugs, and I never got addicted to anything yet because I wasn't really someone who did drugs every single day or every single week even. I just wanted to try them, right? Because I wanted to be the one who tried so many drugs, so people could come to me and ask me, what was it like, granddaddy? Oh, kid, sit around, I'm gonna tell you the story of when I did PCP at a fucking concert or whatever. It's stupid, but I wanted to do it because I didn't feel like I was good enough at anything else, so I had to become the master at something. So I wanted to become the Gandalf of substances. So fast forward a few years, one thing that you have to know, you might recognize that I have a bit of an accent. I speak English very well, but you can tell by my surroundings that this isn't fucking Gary, Indiana, or some fucking Chicago. Oh, shit. Yeah, I'm a European guy, right? You can tell. You can tell by the way I walk, talk, dress, and fart. So, there it is. My identity is out there, I guess, now. But I'm also a U.S. citizen. So one day I said, fuck it. I'm gonna go to the U.S. and have a little bit of an adventure. So I ended up in Florida, which is where I have a couple relatives. And, things started out fine, I never had any real issues with drugs up until that point. And then I started dating this girl, and this girl was a little bit of a stoner. She liked smoking weed, and I liked smoking weed too. But it wasn't an everyday thing. But with her, things started kicking up a notch. You know what I mean? She would bring me a joint after work as a gift. She was that kind of girl. She liked to party. And I guess that's the time where I started underestimating drugs a little bit because I started doing weed more and more often and more often and more often until I was doing it every day. And I wouldn't say that I got super addicted to it, but it was a habit. It became a habit, and I wasn't particularly, interested in breaking it at the time. So I spent about a year with this girl, and when I broke up with her, I was left with, still being, I still had that little something in the back of my mind that said, you need to try as many drugs as you possibly fucking can, just because you have to do it. Otherwise, you won't be cool in the eyes of other losers that want to fucking lose their lives over drugs. So yes, when life presented me with another chance to try another substance, please do. Please give me whatever you want, because I'm a man on a mission. So, yeah, I started smoking, pretty heavily during the next couple of years after my relationship with that girl ended, and that's when something else entered my world, and that is something that I will never forget, and something that will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. Before this other substance entered my life, I started dating this girl, and she's amazing. She's a gem of a human being, and I loved her really much. I was so in love with her, in fact, that, me being autistic, I've had other experiences with girls before, but I don't know, I just felt something with her. It was something else. I felt like I was on I felt like I was on drugs the first time that I felt that genuine happiness, that genuine love for someone. That was a crazy experience. Like, I'll never forget how it felt, like that warmth in my chest and a little tickly feeling, and I had so much energy. I was like, like just jumping around the room and shit. I was giddy, and I'm never giddy. I don't have emotions like that. Like, usually I'm like this. That's my normal face. That's my everyday face that I have for months on end, until something makes me laugh once a year. So yeah, I felt really good with this girl, but one day, I guess I decided, you know what? I guess having a perfect relationship isn't enough. Because, it's not just that. It's not that simple, I guess. Because, autism makes it really hard for me to undergo big life change. Fuck you. Big life changes. Especially when they're all one after another. It was non-stop at that time of my life, because I just moved to the US. It was a completely new scenery. I was working I worked 2 different jobs in 1 year, and I met a lot of different people, and I met a girl, and then this new girl. There was so much happening, and then at one point I even got robbed. Like, so much was happening, and I couldn't take it. I was always anxious. I was the type of person that, I'm working on it, and I feel like now I'm much more conscious about my choices when it comes to dealing with bad emotions. But at the time I was a fucking wreck. When I felt something bad, I just had to either hide it or put a patch on it. So what I did this time was put a patch on it, and that patch was called Kratom. Kratom is, you can look it up online. It's spelled Kratom. It's a plant from Southeast Asia that basically is an opioid. It's like taking an oxy or a fucking hydro, right? There's basically no I guess technically, actually there is difference, because Kratom is not a full agonist of the mu opioid receptors. It's actually a partial. Yes, I fucking know, but from what I read online, it's the same thing pretty much. People get hooked on them just as much. I never tried other opioids, just that. So yeah, when I tried that, something changed in me. I could tell that something was moving, it was working. My anxiety, gone. All the problems that were constantly in my mind, gone. My brain, that for the past 23 years was constantly, flowing with thoughts, non-stop fucking, when you have that non-stop flood of thoughts in your brain, that completely stopped, and I felt at peace for the first time in a long time. That's exactly what I wanted, and that's why it was so dangerous to me. Up until that point, I prided myself in being this confident, safe drug user that never got addicted to anything, super responsible with drugs, and then all of a sudden, this thing got me in a way that nothing ever got me like that before. I felt a grip. I felt like it felt like it gripped my soul, and from that on, I was hooked. It took a little bit because, sure, at first it wasn't this super strong feeling because I was doing powder, which is weaker than the extracts that I was taking later on, but still, I was feeling good, and I was, the reason why I did it in the first place is because I was looking, for ways or like supplements that would fuck the circular saw. The circular saw guy needs to fuck off, really. God damn, I'm pissed today. I just had an argument with my mom right before filming this, and I'm pissed. Thanks. I was looking for an easy solution to so many issues that were so problematic and hard to get rid of, to deal with. And that's, you can't take shortcuts in life. If you're watching this and you have an addictive personality, never try opioids. Not even once. They will rob you of everything. They will take your soul away. That's what happened to me. It didn't happen immediately, but it's a slippery slope. I'll tell you that, because you'll do it once. That's the dilemma, the irony of opioids or any super addictive substance. When you start doing it, first few months, you're like, I can quit whenever you want, and in fact, you can. When you don't want to quit it, that's when you can. That's when you have the full capacity to do so. And then when you actually are like, hey, shit got a little bit real. I want to get out of this. The opioid will say, no, you're mine now. I make the rules now. Now go steal that catalytic converter. We need more of me. Right? It sucks. Kratom made me a slave, I was taking it every day, and it felt good. It felt too good. And, I was spending, thankfully I wasn't still, at that point spending too much money on it, because I was still managing it pretty well, but that's one of those drugs you just cannot manage. No matter how hard, no matter how you cut it, you're not gonna be able to manage opioids. You just cannot do it. Do not even do them once. Trust me. It was fucking up my relationship because I wasn't as present as I wanted to be. I wanted to be more present for my girl, and, I was slowly but surely drifting away, little by little. And at one point, there came a point where I was doing so much of this powder, and mind you, it's a dried leaf that gets crushed into a powder. I was doing spoonfuls like this big of it, and at one point I was doing so much of it, just like gulping it down with water, that I got sick every time I did it, and I puked. One time I had this job at Target, I took a big old spoonful before going to Target, and my girlfriend did not know that I was still doing it, because I tried to quit it so many times. It's so hard to quit. And that time I went to Target and I started feeling really sick. I was cashiering. I was, there cashiering at Target at one point. I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. And I puked the most disgusting, vile, evil vomit of my entire life. I looked myself in the mirror and I was like, this is not me. This is enough. Like, what am I doing? Why am I still doing this if it's causing me harm? I'm tired. And that's when I tried to quit powder for the last time. And that's when I quit powder. Period. But then 2 months later, I was doing pretty good. Powdered kratom is relatively easy to get off of, but what is not is extracts. And that's what really fucked me up. One day after those 2 months, I walked into a smoke shop for papers. I just was looking for papers because I wanted to roll a joint. And I just looked in the direction of the kratom section, kind of as a, hey there. I don't know. I just looked at it. I guess the clerk of the smoke shop saw me, glance at the kratom, and he was like, we have this new kratom coming in lately. It's been flying off the shelves. Everyone fucking loves it, It's been selling like hotcakes. You gotta try it. And I was like, what's different in it? He's like, oh, it's super strong. You gotta try it. And in my mind, I thought about that time at Target and all those times that I told my girlfriend about my relapses, because I was trying to tell her that I had a problem, because I did recognize that I had a problem, but I wasn't strong enough to fight it, or there was a part of me that didn't want to fight it. And that day I bought that kratom that the guy recommended to me, and I will never forget that day. I will never forget it, because it was this little pack about this big with 4 tablets in it. 4 little tablets. They looked like, like tiny little Tums. Just tiny little pressies. 4 tiny little pressies, and as soon as I got home, I wanted to try it. I popped all 4 of those pills, and 10 minutes later, I was high. I was off my rocker in a way that I've never been before. I was nodding off, in that moment, I laid on my bed, belly up, and I thought to myself, I'm in trouble. I'm in big, big trouble. That became my drug of choice for the next almost a year. My life after that, started to revolve exclusively around, before, but when I was just doing powder, I could just live, kind of normally. I wasn't spending as much as one would do with, like a fentanyl addiction or something. But when I started doing these little tablets, which were called, they have a thing that's called 7-OH. God damn, that was the decisive day that, I knew things were not going to be the same anymore. But that didn't mean that I wanted to stop. Actually, I did the polar opposite of stopping. I just kept going, and I couldn't stop for one thing in the world. From then on, my job started, my performance on my job, was shit. I just spent every single day just looking forward to that one dose. And mind you, this shit is not cheap. They go for like fucking like $40 a pop for just one little pack, And sure, it's supposed to be one serving, like one half of these 4 pills was supposed to be like one serving, but I already had a high tolerance, so that wasn't the case for me. A serving was a pack for me. But yeah, at one point I started really losing control of my life. My bank account started draining more and more and more and more until Every single month, I barely scraped by paying rent. Barely. Sometimes paying rent would send me in the negative because I was working in a little restaurant at the time, and I made good tips for a while. All those tips went to my drugs, and even the money that wasn't tips, a lot of it went to drugs too. That drug. That drug, just to put in perspective, how potent and how strong and life-changing opioids are. As soon as I started doing this one thing, all of my interest for other drugs stopped. Weed was trash to me. Like, I stopped doing it. I was like, why would I fucking do weed when I have this? This is pure bliss. That makes you, the thing is, me having a dependent personality, I need validation, I need feeling loved, I need feeling, like I'm not alone. And this drug did it all for me. It, it gave me that sense of being cuddled, and it made me forget about all my problems, and it was like having someone warm and loving embrace you and telling you everything's okay. You're with me now. Everything's okay. You don't have to worry about anything else now. No, just go to sleep, and you're just, you feel this feeling of love and warmth. And for a person like me, that's my life goal. That's why this drug did so much damage to me. I couldn't get off of it because of how good it was. That's the problem about opioids. It's that they feel too good. They feel too good. Anyone would get hooked on them. Everyone has that need for love that would immediately be quenched by opioids. There's not one person in the world who's not gonna try opioids a few times and not gonna, develop an addiction to them. Not one person in the world. That's how strong this stuff is. And I'm not gonna be naive and blame everything I did on the drug, because yes, I made my girlfriend's life a living hell. Living with an addict is terrible, terrible. And being friends with an addict is horrible. An addict is always gonna try to take advantage of your niceness, always try to swindle you into, providing his next dose. That's what addicts do. Addicts are just broken people, and there are people who have been repurposed by this one chemical that makes getting high their whole priority over everything in their lives. You never see an opioid addict who has a successful career or whatever, or if it happens, they get addicted while they have success, and they get washed off and they lose it all. That's what happened to me. I lost everything. I had a car, I had a job, I had a girl that meant everything to me, and we meant everything for each other. We loved each other, and I broke her because I lied to her so many times. I promised her so many fake and empty promises. I took from her, not stealing. I never stole from anyone. Thank God, I was almost there. I almost thought about stealing and I didn't do it, but that's how powerful it is. I'm such a peaceful, nice person, and I almost got to the point of stealing, which I despise people who steal. It's like, I hate it. Like, I have a personal hatred for people who steal, because I got stuff stolen from me, and it was traumatizing for me. It just made me a completely different person, and that cautious and responsible drug user was no more, and now I was just a drug addict. I tried to get help, in many forms, but I just wasn't ready. I checked myself into rehab, and that wasn't enough. Suboxone was helping me, and I'm in the process of quitting Suboxone as of now. I've been taking it for the past 6 months, 7 months. I've been taking it for longer than that. It was on and off. But Suboxone has saved my life. And, you know, I've been clean for a while now, for 6 months, actually, which I'm pretty proud of. But during the time that I was an addict, actively addicted, I was terrible. To everyone that loved me, my friend, I would always borrow money from everybody. I would always, find a way to get, what I wanted, no matter what. Addicts are super good at manipulating people. We addicts are very good manipulators. We can get what we want. With the good sob story and, the good excuse, we can get our dose, no problem. And, I became a manipulator. I became a liar. I became someone who was absent in my girl's life. And I wanted to give her the world, but I couldn't. I was trapped. I was just a shadow of myself. I really feel bad for my ex-girlfriend because she bent over backwards to do everything she possibly could to get me to stop using Kratom or 7-OH. She just did everything she possibly could. She loved me so much. She showed me the love that no other human in the world ever showed me. And she's the only person that ever understood me, because no one in the world except for my mom and her, not even my brother really understands me. My mother and my ex-girlfriend, they understand me because they know they've tried to understand me as much as they could, and they're the only people who have seen the real me. It's crazy to say, but nobody knows who I am, and that includes me, as I said in my other video that I will, link at the end of this one. She was the only person I could be myself with, and I wouldn't have traded her for. It's so ironic, isn't it? Because I wouldn't have traded her for all the money in this world. But ironically enough, I always traded, her time for attention for my time for drugs. Her, giving attention to her to giving attention to drugs. It's the irony of being the addict. You just can never win. And you are not, you aren't who you're supposed to be. Thankfully now I'm sober. I've been sober for 6 months, and I'm planning, I don't feel that worm in the back of my head telling me what to do anymore. I feel free, and it's great. That's what led me to create this channel in the first place. I wasn't in the right headspace to, be vulnerable enough to expose myself and tell my story, because it's not a story I am proud of. I fucking hated the person I was. I was a despicable person. I stole money didn't steal directly, but still, borrowing money from people without even giving it back is basically stealing. I borrowed money from my uncle and aunt, bless their soul, from my friend, my roommate.
Shout out to Juan, the beautiful Colombian roommate, beautiful, luscious hair, great guy, big penis.
One time I did it with my girlfriend, anyone I possibly could, even my fucking boss at work one time I asked money to. Can you believe, you gotta be possessed by a fucking demon to do that kind of shit. And I was, in a way. I'm not gonna blame everything I did on Kratom, because I made the choice to do it. I made the choice to keep doing it. I made the choice of lying, and I made the choice. All the choices I've made, all the shit I've done it. The drug didn't. The drug just made it easier for me to do that stuff. The drug didn't do anything. I did it. And I deal with a lot of guilt every day for what I've done. But if there's one thing that I want to tell you is, if you're in my position, don't hate yourself. I know it's easy to hate oneself, and if you hate yourself, you'll just give in to the same cycle that made you do drugs in the first place. Because a big trigger for me, to use drugs was self-hatred. It was shame and guilt. And the more I used drugs, the more I lied, the more ashamed and and guilty I felt, and the more I wanted to do drugs because I wanted to get rid of these horrible feelings. You have to feel these feelings. Let yourself be mad. Let yourself be sad. But for the love of God, don't put a band-aid on it. You need to find yourself, and if you have a strong identity, you need to fight for your ideals, and you need to, if you find yourself in a situation where you're dependent on a drug, say to yourself, what do I really want to do? Think about the dreams that you had before you became a drug addict. Don't you want to see those dreams realized? And just talk to your family. Tell them the truth. I told everyone the truth. Now that I'm sober, I made it a mission to tell everyone the truth. I told my uncle and aunt that I stole from them. They were very, they understood me, but I still felt like shit because I love my family. Everyone who's family to me is... I'm sorry. But please, you have to fight for yourself. Find your purpose. I got lost in drugs because I didn't feel like I had a purpose. I hated myself. I didn't have a sense of self that was developed enough, and I wanted to fix my problems in an easy way. Don't do that. You have to face your problems head on. That's the only way you're gonna, get anything out of it. Otherwise, you're just ignoring the inevitable. Your issues are always gonna catch up to you one day. It's inevitable. Don't try to run away from them. I'm really grateful to be sober, and I'm grateful that things, even though I've lost my car, my job, my friends, and I've lost everything that I had in my life, and I'm left with nothing now. I've even lost my brother. I lost everything, and even though things went this way, I'm still grateful for how things turned out, because otherwise I would be, if I stayed in America instead of going back to my home country and getting free healthcare and free, Suboxone, I would be homeless, in jail, or dead. That's the reality of things. I just want to warn you guys against the dangers of trying to seek validation from, the wrong sources. When you feel like you're not special, it's okay. Nobody is special. Just be you, and things will work out. Thanks for listening to me. See you guys next time.